faced, particularly in the past 4 or 5 years, some very difficult financial times. Our economy was in recession. It stalled. The recovery is still very slow. It will pick up, and the budget assumptions that are contained in this budget and on which this budget are predicated, I hope they come to pass, and I think they will. I think a number of very, very promising initiatives like Deep Panuke and other exploration on the Scotian shelf, I think the shipbuilding contract, the maritime link, and all of the economic development activity we see around Halifax in particular, will all combine to give this government greater economic flexibility than probably 2 and perhaps 3 previous administrations have had. But nevertheless, we don't entirely know that that is to be the case. And nevertheless, we still have significant debt and a significant debt load in the province. And this government has made no attempt in this budget, its first budget, to continue to be prudent with respect to expenditure management and controls in our public services. And I think that is very concerning. It is very concerning. And this is a year that will be lost in terms of being able to pace yourself. And we will not get this year back. They will not get this year back. And let's hope that we do not find ourselves as a province jammed up against a political mandate and time in between that will see severe restraint or the kinds of decisions we have seen from previous Liberal administrations. I was a rookie member of this House with a minority Liberal government, a Liberal government that fell on a budget where it attempted to introduce a budget with off-book spending in the healthcare sector of, I don't know, it must have been $300 million. Anyway, I think it might even have been six. So, no. The Minister of Economics, oh yes, it was way more than 200 million. It was close to $300 million. So that creative accounting has its genesis in that party over there. In this particular budget, we have our act that is in front of us, the Financial Measures Act, which is the enabling piece of legislation that accompanies the budget. We have essentially 2 provisions. We have the provision to remove the graduate retention rebate, to eliminate the graduate retention rebate, which, as we've debated here, is a huge tax grab from the young graduates of this province. 2/3 of the recipients of the graduate retention rebate are young people between the ages of, well, I hear the Minister of Health and Wellness saying they had a job. They were lucky. The Minister of Finance says they were lucky. They were lucky. Isn't that, Mr. Speaker, that's kind of a sad statement in this day and age, that a young person between the ages of 20 and 29 is lucky because they had a job. They probably had one of the highest student debt loads of any young person in the country. And this program offered some debt relief to those young people. It was a way for them, to see some income returned into their pockets that made it possible for them to stay and choose to stay in Nova Scotia. And I know that the Minister of Finance has apologized for saying that students felt entitled, but I wonder how sincere that apology was when I hear comments like this. They were lucky to have a job. You know, they were lucky to have a job. That's not how I see the young graduates who choose to stay in our province, Mr. Speaker. I am so pleased that they have a job. I am so pleased that they stay in Nova Scotia. I am so pleased that we can offer some tax relief to them, that we can help them with those astronomical debt loads that they carry and make Nova Scotia the attractive place that it is for people to stay. So this is part of the FMA that's in front of us tonight, will be to remove this program. And this is a program that this year would be worth about $50 million. And the government talks about, well, how they're going to do other things to replace this program. But so far, what we know is being replaced is a very small fraction of that $50 million. We have $1.6 million replacing the graduate retention rebate through the interest relief, the $800 annually on student loan interest, but that doesn't come anywhere close to what people would be receiving through the graduate retention rebate. And additionally, there will be a new program, Pathway Opportunities to Employment, or $1.6 million, and we know none of the features of that program and how exactly that is going to work, and whether or not that money will be transferred into the hands of young graduates, or whether it will be an employment-based program into the hands of employers, and apportioned through some kind of training program or apprenticeship program or internship program. So this is not something that gives us much encouragement in terms of this government's approach to retaining our best and our brightest, for sure. The other thing I want to talk about, of course, with respect to this bill is the HST. Now, we sat in this legislature for a number of years, and we listened to many, many hours of debate where today's Premier, the current Premier, and the current Finance Minister, they criticized, they railed against the increase in the HST. And you would have thought, given the words that came out of their mouths in those debates, that this would be at the top of their priority to deal with. Now, this is their first budget, and what do we see? There's no spending restraint, and there's no tax relief in terms of the HST. None whatsoever. And it's hard to believe that those members across the floor are the same members that were over here speaking about what a blasphemy it was for the previous government to increase the HST. So it's interesting to see how quickly their tune has changed. The HST and the revenue from the HST suddenly is needed. 4.5, 5 years after the recession. 4.5, 5 years after a recession, the HST revenue is needed. But right on the cusp of the recession, when the revenues from the offshore and the royalties from the offshore and all of the other revenues into the province were dropping like a cement block, it wasn't needed. And the Minister of Finance is a very well-informed member. She reads and she pays attention, and she knows full well what the Deloitte report said in 2009 about the state of the province's finances. And she knows full well that that report said that if we continued on the path we were on with respect to expenditures, that the operating expenses of the province in a 4-year period would grow, and the deficit at the end of 4 years would be $1.4 billion. $1.4 billion. And that was confirmed by, well, I hear the minister, my friend from the south end of Halifax, say that's not accurate. But you should read the report. It's in the report. It's black and white in the report.
Order,
and I don't
please.
have.
I'd like to remind the Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party to direct her comments through the chair, please. The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I was just saying that the member from Halifax Citadel Sable Island would find it quite interesting to actually read the Deloitte report with respect to what it was that they were projecting for a deficit at the end of 4 years if the expenditures of government continued on the path they were on. And they were projecting an operating deficit in the province of Nova Scotia of $1.4 billion. $1.4 billion. It's there in black and white. I did not, this is not my number. This is not some fantasy that people have made up. It was something that was in the Deloitte report. Moreover, it is also contained in the report of 4 very eminent, knowledgeable economists, Elizabeth Beale, Donald Savoy, Lars Osberg, and Tim O'Neill, who looked at the situation in Nova Scotia, and they concurred that this was the path that we were on, to a $1.4 billion deficit. And in order to come to grips with that, a plan had to be made to deal with both the revenue and the expenditure. You know, being in government is not easy, and we all know that. There are limited resources, there are lots of needs, there are lots of wants, and lots of demands. And you can't please everyone. You have to make some very, very tough choices. And sometimes the revenue is fairly dismal. And in times of recession, slow growth, it can be very difficult. So in that context, the HST was increased. The minister opposed that. The minister stood here and railed against it and really berated the government, the minister of the day, and the government for having made this decision, thought there were other decisions that could have been made. But yet, here we have a government now that they've forgotten all about that. That's it's no problem. The minister says, well, you know, financially we need it. Financially, well, you know, what's changed? Well, the Minister of Natural Resources seems to have some ideas about what's changed, and I'm sure he'll stand up and let us know, because he seems to have answers to a lot of things that none of the rest of us have. But Mr. Speaker, you know, I think that the minister, when he has an opportunity, he should talk to the Minister of Finance and find out more about the choices that are being made and what's in front of them for choices. Now, I'd like to table a press release from the, looks like this is a press release from the Liberal Party at the time in opposition that says, well, actually it's a media release on this very thing. It says, this is by, if I could read for a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, David Jackson, the provincial reporter from the Herald, says, and I quote, the Grits tried to change the Financial Measures Act to say that if the NDP is in power in 2014 and doesn't follow through on a commitment to cut the harmonized sales tax by a percentage point, an election would be triggered. It's different, I guess, Mr. Speaker, when you get into government. You have all kinds of insights that you didn't previously have. Well, I hear the member from Cape Breton North saying, it's do as I say, not as I do, and isn't that the case? So, you know, here we have a very small act accompanying the budget, a budget that the member says is open, transparent, and honest, a budget that contains very few difficult choices. There's $400 million, I believe, of new expenditure in this budget, and a projected plan for the government that will continue to add much more than $1 billion to the debt over a 4-year period. And the government has no intention of doing in government what they said or what they led people to believe they were going to do when they were in opposition. Mr. Speaker, I think I've made my points about what the problems are with this particular piece of legislation. But I'm looking forward to hear from members of the government on this. They have a lot to say when opposition members are up and have an opportunity. So I'd be more than happy to relinquish the floor and give one of those members an opportunity to engage in debate on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to take just a few minutes tonight to address a bill, the Financial Measures Act for this year, on behalf of the people that I represent. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting. I heard a member previous talk about the recession and how she felt it might be over, but I can tell you where I come from, people aren't saying the recession is over. They're still very much feeling the effects in many, many ways, and they're going to, and they accept that for some time to come, for a whole variety of reasons. Now, let's be honest, Mr. Speaker, the last 4 or 5 years have not been stellar in the province of Nova Scotia at all. They've been tough times. Decisions have been made. Some would see, according to last October, maybe not the best of decisions, and they made a new decision. They chose another party to come into this place, Mr. Speaker, and to try to make better decisions, or maybe decisions that were more acceptable to them. Well, that's fine. That's democracy. We're lucky to have that in this province and certainly in this country. That's the way it should be, Mr. Speaker. Nothing wrong with that. Not a thing wrong with that. But you know what? Each time there's an election, what people talk about, Mr. Speaker, regardless about who is coming into government, and it was no different in 2009 when this party was going out and the NDP were coming in, there was hope that things would be different. That's why we have changes. That's why we have the ability to make those changes, Mr. Speaker. They hope things will get better. They elect new people. I did a count today. There were 38 people in 2006 that were elected that did not come back to this House in 2009. There were 33 people who did not come back in 2013 that came in here in 2009. That's amazing when you think about how many people have changed. And I took a little bit of time this morning just sitting in the UNIAC room and I was looking while waiting for a meeting, and I started counting faces. And as I went around, I went, wow, look at how many people are no longer here in 8 short years that I've been here. I think there are two or three maybe from the class of 2006, as I call it, left. That's very unusual, I thought, but people want change. That's acceptable. When we look at this budget and we look at this bill before us, I think that people are quickly frustrated when the students, I talked to a lot of students, I've had a lot of calls in the last little while about this student retention money going away. It was a huge benefit. There's no question. We've heard a lot of discussion about that, a tough decision that government made. Government will ultimately be judged on that decision. Doesn't matter what we as members maybe think or say or rant about, government will ultimately be looked at some point and say that was good, maybe that paid off, maybe not. Right now people aren't happy, we know that. I had a call today from a young man who's a businessman. He's in construction. And he said, why does nothing ever change in this province? Things only tend to get worse. He's taxed to death. He talks about working hard every day, and when he goes to purchase something, all he pays is tax, tax, and more tax. When he buys his gas, of course, that's in the news today. We heard New Brunswick went up a couple of pennies last night. What's going to happen tonight in Nova Scotia? Well, I don't know. Someone in here might know, but it's in all likelihood going up, as history would dictate. We may reach record high at some point in this province. Can people afford that? No, they can hardly afford to get back and forth to work now, Mr. Speaker. You know, that's an issue. But more importantly, people want to know, they say, this young man asked me today, what do you got to do to make a real change in there where you work, in that place they call the legislature? Nothing ever seems to change, and it doesn't matter which party's in government there, you all seem to be the same. Well, you know what? That's a fair comment, and it's not just from that young man. I hear it all the time. Why are there no changes? What does it take? Who has to run? Who has to get elected? What kind of decisions need to be made to benefit Nova Scotians? And let's talk about everyday Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. Everyday, hard-working Nova Scotians. Everyday Nova Scotians who are trying to find a job, Mr. Speaker, who cannot, who have lost jobs. In my area alone, I could reference Fundy Gypsum, who's been gone in the last few years. Minas Basin we saw shut down. Over 100 jobs more gone there. That's just in a very few miles of one another. Good paying jobs, 40, 50 grand a year. Millions of dollars into the tax base. As anyone who ever sat on council in here would know how important that is. Millions have been lost right there. The spin-off effect of that has been hugely detrimental. So again, people have hope during election time. They put people in this place, this historical chamber, to create good legislation, to put forward bills, policies, regulations that will be beneficial. Gas prices, jobs, power prices, power rates. Never ending, that battle. That's been going on now for years. It's all we hear about. What are we doing about it? Doesn't appear a whole lot in the eyes of many people. People going to the food bank. I don't know what it's like in other members' areas in this House. Hundreds, Mr. Speaker, a month go to the food bank in my local area. Hundreds. That is wrong. That is, you know, people ask, what are you doing to help me out? How do you make these decisions? They want a job. People that are homeless, people who have just lost their homes, 3, I think, on the weekend due to fire, displaced. Now living, one gentleman in my area and 2 children, living in a room with his mother that might be half the size of this chamber, Mr. Speaker. That's the reality of everyday, hard-working people in this province. They're the people, Mr. Speaker, that want to know, what are you doing for me? How will you make life better in this province for me? When will those decisions come? They hope to see that by way of programs that come forward in a budget. And I know the Minister of Finance knows this, and every member in here knows this. But they don't see it. It's not the level we speak at. We speak in higher terms, to the tunes of, we listen to the estimates. How many tens or hundreds of millions, or billions, in some cases, in departments? They can't even fathom that figure, Mr. Speaker. Can't even begin to imagine what that kind of money management is like. Seniors living on $12,000 a year, I ask them when they come into my office, how do you live on that? They don't. They say, Chuck, we don't live on that. We exist. That's what they do. They don't live. They want to know, what programs are you putting forward as a government? What are you doing as a member in that House to create and help and work toward creating programs? Are you putting forward to help them people out? Well, there's a few programs that are out there. Government tries to create maybe efficiency Nova Scotia programs. That might not be a good one to bring up tonight, but anyway, you know, again, though, we do work these programs to say we know that they're not utilized to some degree. They're paying for it. We do our best in my office to say, take advantage of that. You know, you're paying $50 a year in your power bill for an efficiency program. Go get the $50 worth of free stuff that they're offering. At least you can call it even, if nothing else. Perhaps there's some satisfaction in that. I don't know how many people look at it that way. I do. That's okay. People take advantage of the program. That's all right. What other programs are available? Everyday hard-working Nova Scotians in this province want to know, what are you doing to help us out? What are you going to do to keep your kids here? I talked to this young man today. He said, if my family wasn't here, my grandparents weren't here and so on, I wouldn't be here. I'd be gone. I've got one daughter in Ontario, 10 years. When you coming home? Why would I come home? You got a job for me at home? No. Sorry, I don't. Guess you're right, Jill. Stay there. I got another gal in university. What's she going to do? Well, don't know, but she probably won't be in Nova Scotia. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, some of us aren't going to be here either. Some of us are going to have to move to the middle of the country so that we can visit closer with our children in years to come, because they won't be here, unless there's opportunity to turn this province around. And there could be, Mr. Speaker. There's ideas. There's not one party or one political stripe that have all the best ideas. It's been said before in this House, and I've always agreed with that. Bill Estabrook's a very fine man, said that on many occasions. Good man. Stood here, worked hard for his constituents. Probably still be here if he ran again. But he had some good ideas, Mr. Speaker, and I know it's tough to be in government. When I came into this place in 2006, although I didn't sit around the cabinet table, I was on the government side, and I know that was no fun some days. Some would claim it doesn't matter, the worst day is still a good day in government. Well, maybe so, maybe not. The last number of years have not been a great time for anyone in government. Tough decisions had to be made, as I said. There's a lot of tough decisions yet to be made for many years ahead, many years ahead. We talk about the debt. We talk about budgets. It was interesting, again, to listen to the member speak previous. What did the debt climb by? $1.5 billion in 4 years, near 5 years, something like that? Ridiculous amount of money. Anybody who's ever took a little bit of education course, Economics 101, don't spend what you haven't got. There's no further lesson required. You know, that's easier said than done. I realize that when there's needs out there. It's not quite that simple for a government in a province this small. We talk about immigration. How do we raise our revenues? There's only one way to raise revenues, and it's through tax base. What ideas are there out there to bring people in? Previous governments have talked about immigration as well, Mr. Speaker. Not a lot has happened. It's become very difficult to become an immigrant and come to Canada for some reason. You know, we look around at other ideas around the world. We've done a study in this province a couple of years back or so on land use and land availability through agriculture. Former minister had a study done, and I forget how many thousands of acres there were available. Why aren't we doing something with them? We talk about how desperate agriculture is in this province. I don't even think it equates to 1% of the provincial budget anymore. It's less than that. Others would know for sure, Mr. Speaker. Why not bring some of those people that know what they're doing? We've done it years and years and years ago, hundreds of years ago, when people came here. We allotted plots of land for them to work that land. Is that such a crazy idea today? Maybe not. You see New York State in America, tax-free zones, Canadians as well. I mean, there have to be ideas to help grow the province, to create revenue, to make you survive. Mr. Speaker, there are other ways, thinking outside the box, but everyday Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, like the young man I spoke with this afternoon, what are you doing to make life better for me to stay here? You're making life terrible. You're making life worse. And he's frustrated on a number of fronts. And he's rightfully took the half hour or so on the phone when I spoke to him to share his rant with me and his concerns, and they were all legitimate. Every one of them were legitimate. Young family man, one child, about a year old, just married not long ago, and he admits, my wife has a good paying job. Works for the provincial government, by the way. Great. Makes good money. He's a businessman, does all right. But you know what? He still lives paycheck to paycheck trying to survive. Doesn't live lavishly. That's the reality of today in Nova Scotia. Now, maybe some, doesn't matter. Maybe that's not what our goal is here, is to make life better for Nova Scotians. But I think when we're on the doors knocking and asking for their support, we're asking for that vote. We're thinking about it then. Do we think about it the day after the election? Maybe. Do we think about it the week after the election and the months after the election? We should be. I'm not sure that that's the case often, or at least it doesn't matter what my opinion is. What I hear from my constituents is, you forget all about us. That's what it feels like. So my job is to stand here and to bring these issues up and to raise these concerns, certainly around the Financial Measures Act as it is today. And it's a very short one. I don't know that I've seen a Financial Measures Act quite this condensed. Small, short, 2 clauses. Okay, that's fine.
Order, please. The honourable member for Hants West has the floor. I just counted. There's 10 other conversations going on in the room here. If you need to exit the chamber, please do, and carry on your conversations. The honourable member for Hants West has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and maybe my words are boring the rest or something. I don't know. Maybe it's of no interest, but I can tell you what. I'll tell you this, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I know. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you this. At least I'm doing what I was elected to do by that person who called me today, standing in my place, Mr. Speaker, on his behalf, and all the great people that I have the honour of representing to bring forward their points. He's but one example. They're daily. Again, talking about the people that are hungry. I had a student come into my office a short while ago. Haven't had a meal in 2 days, but he had to be at class tonight. Those are the realities of our people in Nova Scotia today, Mr. Speaker. That's a tough pill to swallow for some of us who fortunately haven't been there, but we might. We don't know where we're going when we leave here. We don't know what the future holds. Hard times can happen overnight. You do not know what will happen. We've seen it on more than one occasion. And it will come around again. It will. So will good times, by the way, I think. There will be an opportunity in the future that we can hope for good times once again in the province of Nova Scotia, where we might financially be able, where money may be freer, to be able to spend on programs, to pave roads. We all have roads. We heard a conversation late debate. As funny as some might have taken it to be, there's nothing funny about it, really. There's all kinds of roads that need work. That's just one small piece. We'd love to put more money in his budget. We got a health care budget that takes 42%, over $4 billion, Mr. Speaker. What about community services, economic development, and jobs? Communities, culture, and heritage, maybe a small piece, but there is some meaning to that. Natural resources, I can look around the room and pick them all. I've been here long enough. I know what happens in them departments. I know the benefits. So do those who have reaped the benefits in our areas, projects that need to get done. Mr. Speaker, you and I have had a conversation about a new arena we're trying to build over where I come from, birthplace of hockey. I put a bill in this House in 2007. That bill's never been proclaimed, but passed unanimously. Sits around somebody's desk, never gets proclaimed. Big thing. Talk about the economy and financial measures. What that is, that's a vision. That's not just a place where you're going to play the game of hockey, albeit important, on the surface of ice. This is about a vision for the area. This is about jobs, spin-off effect, talking about tours and ski mart talking, curling and the wineries, highest tides in the world. All kinds of opportunity if you really think outside the box on this. We'll talk more about that as the days and the months and probably maybe years even go by in here, Mr. Speaker, but it's all relative. It's all about what are we doing for everyday Nova Scotians that elected us and put us in this place to stand in our place here and talk about what it is we're supposed to be doing. It's not about one party or another party, and we'll criticize one another. Well, that's fine. I guess that's all part of what I call the silliness or the game that goes on in this place some days. I said earlier today when I was in debate with the Minister of Service Nova Scotia, if you took the politics out of this chamber, you might actually get something done in Nova Scotia. Not many may agree with that, Mr. Speaker, but it's my opinion. I'm entitled to it. That's democracy. That's what my people elected me to come here and talk about. Them. What's right for them. I do hope, as we work through this process, and as the months go by and the years and whatever else, maybe I won't be here too much longer, who knows? We'll see. But hopefully, when we're talking about budgets, Financial Measures Act and everything, that programs and all the things that go along with that, and the spending of $9 billion plus now, whatever it might be at, when we think about our $13.5, $14 billion, whatever the debt is provincially, the cost of servicing that alone is phenomenal. Can you imagine if we didn't have it? We should think seriously about what we're doing. Will there be an effect on those students, the graduate retention program? Quite possibly, yes. We're hearing from lots of them. We know what it means to them. It's a heavy debt load. Who wants to come out of school with debt of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000? Some do. Many do. For what? They're looking for that assistance. Maybe we need to rethink that whole process. Maybe it's on a different end that we're helping capture some of that debt. I don't know. But I hope in not this budget, it's not going to happen, but she says maybe the minister will talk more about it. Maybe there's programs down the road that will be assisting our students and our universities and so on. We look forward to hearing all about it, as we do every other department that's out there offering programs up and opportunities for Nova Scotians, and the willingness and the want and the desire to stay here and to work here and to raise their families here and to have a little fun in this fine province. We live in one of the best parts of the world. We would argue that. It's a great place. Who wouldn't want to stay here? Who wouldn't want to come here given the opportunity? Perhaps we need to create that opportunity or think more about creating that opportunity. So, Mr. Speaker, again, it's important that we really think about why we're here when we're talking about this budget. Not that one dime will probably get changed on any one line in any of it. I doubt that it will. It's the same process with the whole estimate process. We go through it. We spend 40 hours in here. We spend 40 hours over there. And for what? We ask questions after questions after questions about money. Not one, in 8 years that I've been here at least, that I've ever seen looking back, not one line item, I don't think, has ever changed in that budget book. I don't think there's ever been an edit that said, oh, Chuck, that just changed. Thanks for that. Well, we don't expect it to. Hence the reason we ask local-based questions, try to reconfirm some things that might be accurate or inaccurate, and show the people at home that there are some benefits maybe to what we're doing here, and to the process of estimates and the budget itself, and that there is a purpose. Because there is, to some degree, and to some degree, some might say, a lot of wasted hours on that, but we like to think there's some effort goes into it too. And the ministers have been very good, I must say, at giving clarification on points that are relevant to us at home and to the people that we represent. And we appreciate that, we do. But nothing changes from that. Let's not kid ourselves. It's the decisions that are made prior to that coming here, prior to the House opening in March. Those decisions made then are what matter. And again, people will judge the government when the time comes on the decisions that they have made, on the programs and whatever else that they've put in place. So I hope as we move forward, this budget, next budget, following budgets, that we take into consideration that there's some ability to help Nova Scotians out that need it, the ones I've referred to. We hope that government will make good decisions, Mr. Speaker. So with those very few words and few minutes, I hope I will take my seat.
If I'm to recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance, it'll be to close debate on Bill number 64, the Financial Measures Act of 2014. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to close debate on this Bill 64. I did want to say just a few words, and I intend to keep it brief, which is difficult after all the information that we've heard from the other side as well that I'd like to respond to. First of all, I believe the leader of the third party has her own revisionist history of the financial situation of the province, and I think it'd be worthwhile noting a few things that I think are erroneous in her description. First of all, I'd say I'm really looking forward to the book that she may be writing along with her other former colleague. We'd like to hear this in a little bit more depth. But, Mr. Speaker, in the lead up to the 2009 election, the NDP said they would not raise taxes, and during a debate during that election, their then leader, the member for Cole Harbour, am I allowed to say his name? Darrell Dexter said in the debate that he would not raise taxes. That was why all of us were very surprised when the HST was raised very shortly after they came to office. That was a broken promise, and it was completely counter to what they promised in opposition. And Mr. Speaker, I would mention that our current Premier was very honest in that debate and said that there was no way he could promise not to raise taxes until he saw the condition of the financial situation. And Mr. Speaker, that's very important. That's a distinction between this party and the party opposite. And I think that's very important. Mr. Speaker, I think that in going forward, the former government made sure to hire consultants and get reports and try and vilify the previous government, the official opposition today, to say that they were responsible for everything that was wrong in the world. And in getting the report from the Deloitte consultants, if you read the report, it says that the HST increase would be acceptable if it meant that there would be no additional debt. That was supposed to counter the need for more debt financing. But that didn't happen, Mr. Speaker. The HST rose, and so did the debt. And it rose about net debt by about $1.5 billion, but more importantly, the debt that we have to pay, that we pay interest on, the bonds and the outstanding debt, went up $3 billion, Mr. Speaker. It's called our funded debt, and it's what we pay interest on, and at the end of March 2013, it stood at $15.3 billion. But 4 years earlier, it was $12.2. So $12.2 billion up to $15.3 billion in the debt that we need to service. And that equates to $180 million, roughly, in additional service charges. So you can understand that any government today is bearing the cost of that, and any future government continues to bear that cost, regardless of which of us are going to sit in the seat and be the finance minister and make these decisions. So I have gone out of my way, Mr. Speaker, not to waste time, energy, and money on previous audits and more consultants to look at what happened in the last 4 years. I want to move forward, and I believe the budget that was presented was a fair and accurate presentation of where we're at. I can tell you that through many hours of going through departmental budgets and looking at approvals of budgets, every effort was made to contain costs, every effort. But, Mr. Speaker, time and again, we found programs that were being offered with no funding, that the previous government had said, yes, continue to do that, continue to offer this and that program, the program that provides energy-efficient equipment. What's that called? Oil tanks. It's called EHAP. Is that right? The EHAP program. They were instructed, continue to offer that, but we won't put any more money in your budget for it. You don't have money for that. But continue to tell the people of Nova Scotia that they can apply for it. Well, how ridiculous is that? And if they have people assigned to it and programs are approved, then clearly there's going to be an over-expenditure or a need to come back and say we're over budget. We found that time and again in every department. We found that, there was a manipulation of the date on which social assistance checks would go out, so that this past year it would look like there were 11 months of checks, not 12. That did a nice handy maneuver to save $17 million on the books, but not in reality, Mr. Speaker. In reality, that $17 million had to go out the door to people who were being very much put in a position of anxiety and distress because of the change in the date. We reversed that, Mr. Speaker. We want an honest assessment. If there's 12 months in the year, there are 12 payments in the year. Mr. Speaker, we didn't try to bend ourselves into all kinds of crazy shapes to come up with a budget that would not be honest. And I really do take exception to the idea that we put as much as possible in last year. The example given by the member opposite was $14 million that went in to recognize interest payments that are being forgiven from 2008 to 2013, to the end of that fiscal year. We were obliged to recognize that in that year because the decision and the policy had been taken, and it recognized all those years, 2008 to 2013. That was why the announcement was made at the end of March of 2014, to recognize it in that period. Mr. Speaker, those are honest assessments of where the money should be recognized. And to even speak that we put everything possible in the previous year completely ignores the NDP trick of putting money from the universities in a prepayment, which they did the year before on March 28th. They prepaid $35 million that was going to Acadia and NASCAD, which belonged in the 13-14 year, but which was paid in the previous year to push a lot of the debt or the deficit higher in that year and allow them to show what was supposedly a balanced budget in 13-14. Mr. Speaker, these are no more than manipulations and tricks, and we did not do that. And I do take exception to that being suggested in this budget. Mr. Speaker, I've given some idea of what was included in the efforts to make this budget a less deep deficit. We've worked hard. We cut costs in every department. We were also inheriting the Labour mandate of 2, 2.5, and 3%, which is in contrast, I might add, to other provinces who in the last number of years have had 0s and 1% increases. BC has just recently had a 5-year agreement with their health unions for 1% a year over 5 years. And they also included an option to cost share some of the GDP growth if it exceeds what is actually estimated. So that way they've made some option of increase if their economy is stronger. We didn't have any of that kind of thinking going on in the previous administration when we got 2, 2.5, and 3%. And we've honored that. We've continued to make sure that all the unions get that. As they came forward, we were at the tail end of that mandate. But, Mr. Speaker, we didn't want to pull back on that because it was a commitment of the previous government and because many other unions had that offer given to them. So, Mr. Speaker, I think on every count you would find that this government has been as fair as possible with the people working for us, with our obligations and right across the board. And, Mr. Speaker, what the people of Nova Scotia have before them in the budget is a fair assessment. Now, that doesn't end there because we have a huge job to go forward. We have to pull ourselves as a province out of the current deficit and work as fast as we can towards a surplus situation. We appreciate that. But to get there, Mr. Speaker, when decisions are made and programs are curtailed, we need help. We need people in the province to support that, because this is not an easy road to hoe, and previous governments have not taken those harder decisions. And if they don't, then that's why we're still in this position, Mr. Speaker. The Ivany report has called upon us to get our fiscal house in order. Mr. Speaker, I've committed that we will begin a much more detailed analysis of each of the departments and their spending requirements, but we're not going to stop investments that are going to help the economy grow. We're going to make sure that they are balanced changes. The most important thing for this province is that we get our economy moving. And the leader of the third party has mentioned some of the big projects that are on the horizon. Let us all hope that each and every one of them grows and matures and becomes a reality, because we need those to kickstart the economy, to create jobs, to provide opportunity for the young people in this province, and we want to do all of those things in the coming months. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to close. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, with those short remarks, I would like to close debate on second reading of Bill number 64. Thank you.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 64, the Financial Measures Act of 2014. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay? The motion is carried.
Bill number 64, an act respecting certain financial measures.
Ordered that the bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, I move that you now leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into a committee of the whole. We'll now recess. Motion carried.
We'll now recess for 1 minute while we resolve into Committee of the Whole.
The Committee of the Whole House on Bills will come to order. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, would you please call Bill number 44, the Public Trustee Act?
I call Bill number 44, the Public Trustee Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, the Public Trustee Act number 44 comes back from Law Amendments Committee without amendments, and it contains 11 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 49, the Motor Vehicle Act?
I call Bill number 49, the Motor Vehicle Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 49, the Motor Vehicle Act, returns from the Law Amendments Committee without amendments and contains 11 clauses.
Okay. Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 52, the Liquor Control Act?
Bill number 52, the Liquor Control Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 52 comes back from Law Amendments Committee without amendments and contains 10 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Madam Chair, would you please now call Bill number 53, the Police Act?
Bill number 53, the Police Act. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 53 has been referred back from the Law Amendments Committee without amendments and contains 5 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Madam Chair, would you please call Bill number 55, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter?
Bill number 55, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. I recognize the clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 55 has been referred from the Law Amendments Committee without amendment and contains 2 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you please call Bill number 57, the Cemeteries and Funeral Services Act?
Bill number 57, the Cemeteries and Funeral Services Act. I recognize the Clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 57 has been referred from the Law Amendments Committee without amendments and contains 27 clauses.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall the remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Madam Chair, would you please call Bill number 58, the Oil Refineries and LNG Plants Municipal Taxation Act?
Bill number 58, the Oil Refineries and LNG Plant Municipal Taxation Act. I recognize the Clerk.
Madam Chair, Bill number 58 has been returned from the Committee from Law Amendments without amendments and contains one clause.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Shall remaining clauses carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill carry? The bill is carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. A very productive session of Committee of the Whole. I would move that the committee do now rise and report progress to the House.
The motion is carried. The committee will now rise and report its business in the House.
Order, please. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports.
That the Committee of the Whole has met and considered the following bills. Bill number 44, 49, 52, 53, 55, 57, and 58. And the Chairwoman has been instructed to recommend these bills to the House for the favorable consideration of the House.
The Honourable These bills will now be read a third time on a future day. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we now return back to second reading of government bills, and I would now call Bill number 56, the Dental Act.
We'll now call Bill number 56, the Dental Act. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now move that the bill be read a second time, and as the members opposite know, this is really a housekeeping bill that establishes that that indeed it's always been and has been a corporate body, and that's what the Act now clarifies.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Anxious to get that bill through. No, I now close debate on Bill number 56, the Dental Act.
The motion is for a second reading of Bill number 56, the Dental Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 56, an act to amend Chapter 3 of the Acts of 1992, the Dental Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please now call Bill number 62, the Halifax Convention Centre?
We'll now have second reading of Bill number 62, the Halifax Convention Centre. The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Bill 62, the Halifax Convention Centre Act, be now read a second time. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise before the members to speak on Bill 62. The Halifax Convention Centre will be a landmark in downtown Halifax, presenting significant opportunities for economic, tourism and revenue growth for the city and Nova Scotia as a whole. Speaker, the centre will attract thousands of new visitors to Nova Scotia and connect them with communities throughout the province. Through the conferences and other large events it will bring to Halifax and Nova Scotia, the new convention centre will bring more people and business here, benefiting local businesses, generating revenue and boosting tourism. The new centre will be a much bigger space than the current one. Mr. Speaker, think of the large events we, as a province, will now be able to host, bringing many new visitors to our province and offering the opportunity to showcase all that Nova Scotia has to offer. Also think of the people who will be needed to work in this large new space. With construction well underway on the site, we want to be sure that we have the structures in place to be ready for the new centre to open in 2016. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our partners in the new convention centre, the federal government, which is a one-third contributor to the construction project, and the Halifax Regional Municipality. Yesterday, Mayor Mike Savage joined me to talk with the media about this bill, about our partnership and the opportunity ahead of us. Mr. Speaker, the provincial government and HRM will share responsibility for managing the new convention centre. Together we will establish a new corporation to manage and operate it. The Halifax Convention Centre Act requires the two levels of government, provincial and municipal, to jointly appoint a board of directors to oversee the corporation. Mr. Speaker, the Act describes and formalizes the formal partnership between HRM and the provincial government and how the new centre will be managed going forward, accountable to all Nova Scotians. The new board of directors will have the skills and experience to help the Halifax Convention Centre attract thousands of people and millions of dollars to Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, once it is in place, the board will set and implement the strategic direction for the new corporation. The corporation will be required to manage the centre in a way that will promote and develop economic development, tourism and industry in Nova Scotia and HRM, and will be accountable to Nova Scotians for its results. This legislation requires the corporation to report to both the provincial government and the Halifax Regional Municipality. This reporting includes annual audited financial statements and a report on the effectiveness and competitiveness of the centre's operations, including a third-party evaluation every 5 years. Mr. Speaker, once this legislation is enacted, the two levels of government can move forward with appointing a full board and planning for the transition of Trade Centre Limited staff to the new corporation. Understanding that Trade Centre organization still needs to continue operating until the new convention centre opens, it's not likely staff will all go at once, but over time to meet the operational needs of the organizations. The new board and the experience and expertise of Trade Centre staff will ensure we are ready, Mr. Speaker, to attract and welcome new visitors to Halifax and our province and maximize this great opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the province and the Halifax Regional Municipality are pleased with their success to date. Sales and marketing is well in hand. Already, 19 groups have committed to bringing national and international conferences to the new centre when it opens. The events booked to date are expected to attract nearly 15,000 visitors to our province, and more are on the way. Mr. Speaker, the new Halifax Convention Centre is an opportunity to connect our businesses, tourism operators, and researchers with visitors from around the world that would explore our province and all we have to offer. This legislation is another important step in getting ready to open the centre, ready to make most of the opportunities the convention centre will bring and to welcome the thousands of new visitors when it opens in 2016. Merci beaucoup.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, I just have a few comments on Bill 62. A few concerns that could easily be clarified, I think, by the minister, maybe in his closing comments, or if not, maybe get some information to me over the next, or to our caucus over the next little while. When looking through the piece of legislation, it looks, looking through it, it looks like it may be possible for the HRM Council to authorize the sale of any convention centre without a public hearing. And currently the situation within the municipality is that any sale of municipal property goes through a public hearing, and they need to put forth a rationale for that sale. So I am concerned that this piece of legislation might allow for the municipality to have a different approach if down the road there's a decision of selling it. So maybe the minister could get some clarification for us on that piece of legislation. The other thing that appears in the legislation is that the sale of shares is possible under this bill for the project or for the convention centre, and I would assume that that may not happen until the convention centre is profitable, but it's still a concern. So could the convention centre be privatized under this bill? That's where some of the concerns that we have in the caucus. So I would hope that the minister may be able to endeavour to get some of those answers for those questions and concerns, and we're more than happy to have this piece of legislation go through the process and over to law amendments. Thanks.
If I'm to recognize the Minister of Economic and Rural Development, it'll be to close debate on Bill number 62, the Halifax Convention Centre Act. The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in light of the couple of points raised by the member of Sackville-Cobequid, we'll certainly look into that and provide the member with that information. As far as the issue regarding the regional municipality, obviously we'll reach out to them for some clarification on the concern raised, but I can certainly advise the member that we have no intentions of privatizing the new convention centre. This bill simply formalizes the new relationship between both the province and HRM and makes it clear that it is a 50-50 partnership. In the operation of that, there was some concern that the previous legislation, in fact, I'm told, was structured such that the sole shareholder of Trade Centre Limited was the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism. I didn't know I had that much of a portfolio, but Mr. Speaker, clearly that's only in legislation, certainly not meant to be reflective of actual ownership. This legislation clearly outlines the fact that it is a 50-50 partnership between the province and HRM, but obviously if any concerns are raised, we'll be certainly happy to address those of the members and any other members or through the law amendments process, any issues that may come out of that as well. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would now close debate on second reading of Bill number 62.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 62, the Halifax Convention Centre Act. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 62, an act respecting the Halifax Convention Centre.
Ordered that the bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please now call Bill number 63, the Education Act.
We'll now call Bill number 63, the Education Act, for second reading. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Bill 63, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act, be read for a second time. Mr. Speaker, the current school review process has been a difficult and emotional process for families, communities, school boards, and municipalities. Mr. Robert Fowler headed a year-long review of the process and did extensive public consultation. He heard the concerns of parents and communities, and as a result, a new school review process is a departure from the past. This legislation sets the foundation for a new process based on long-term planning, public engagement, and collaborative action. Mr. Speaker, the new process will involve the public, municipalities, families, communities, and school boards in a new school options committee. The mandate of that committee, Mr. Speaker, is to focus on examining the best solutions for a region or group of schools versus responding to the proposed closure of only one school. A facilitator will lead that school options committee, Mr. Speaker, and the report and recommendations to the school board will be generated by that committee and not prepared solely by school board staff or by parents or by the community. And Mr. Speaker, we know you cannot legislate trust, but we will begin to try to rebuild the trust through a new process. This legislation will only work if trust is there among the stakeholders. Policies and legislations, Mr. Speaker, have a greater chance for success if there is that element of trust among the stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to hearing from the comments from members of the opposition and encourage them to support this legislation.
The honourable member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this legislation will give everyone more awareness of each step of the process and ample time to prepare. Communities should not have any surprises dropped upon them. It appears under this new school review policy we will witness a more collaborative process and a number of options for schools under review, with closure not necessarily the only one. Mr. Speaker, will school closure continue to be emotional? I think the answer is yes. That's the reality of the process. The process has been that has been used, Mr. Speaker, is just it's not working. I believe this new school review policy is a positive move in the right direction. Would I like to see some schools that are currently in the process in CCRSB involved in this new process? And I guess the answer to that, Mr. Speaker, is yes. Hopefully the air of trust, Mr. Speaker, will eventually surface and communities will feel more comfortable about the process. Again, Mr. Speaker, I think this new bill with review of schools is definitely heading in the right direction. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm just going to be brief on this. We do support the review, as you heard my colleague from Pictou Centre talk about. I have a school the minister is well aware of, Newport Station District Elementary School, which will actually celebrate 50 years this coming Saturday in its existence, and it will close, slated to close right now through a procedure that was indeed emotional and lengthy. It's slated to close at the end of 2014-15 school year, which is unfortunate, but I know that this new law, many questions have been raised, and I think you addressed some of them earlier today, maybe in question period, the minister did, Mr. Speaker, with regards to when it takes effect or whether it's retroactive and what might possibly be done. Really, the only issue personally that I have with it that's been raised through parents of those children now going to Newport Station District Elementary was geographically there's a school 3 minutes up the road in 3 Mile Plains. That could take some, if not all. It was stated at one point they could take all 75-ish students to Newport Station. A letter was sent out recently from the school board through the school acting principal there that basically said there are no more options, you're just all going to Brooklyn now. So it just doesn't make sense from a geographic perspective, I guess, and I'm not sure. I know the minister puts everything back, and maybe that's the right thing to do to the boards, and it may be difficult to get involved in, but some of these decisions via the board I think need to be reviewed more than the school closing process. I'm a little concerned. I've always stood in my place here and talked about the board and our relationship being good, some great people on the board, but there's a lot of I don't know what the right word for it is, a dictatorship if you want. Maybe that's too strong, but it's dictating now. There's only one option. We're going there and that's it. That's not right as far as those parents are concerned. They've just gone through a very emotional couple of years, actually. It's been long, as the minister is aware from previous processes, and it bounced around a bit too as well with what was accurate, what wasn't accurate, and how the process should work. It wasn't a good process. But knowing we're moving to a new world, and Mr. Fowler, I mean, we all know the abilities there and don't question those, but I think that although the minister might wish to be hands-off for the most part with regards to how this process works, I, for one, would like to see her and her department to be a little more hands-on in some of these examples. There aren't a lot of them, I don't think. There may be more to come as populations decline. That's fine. The process is fine. But I think that the department has to be part of that decision-making to some degree. I'd certainly like her to consider some of that. And I have a letter here from the Newport Station District School that basically states that, and I'll table that just for her reference more than anything else. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure she has a copy of it or not, but I would table it. And with those few comments, thank you.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my privilege to stand here this evening and talk on Bill 63. And I, as a MLA, went through the process of a small school closure, so I have a lot of experience with respect to how emotional it is for the community and the challenges. And it's important to note that the school closure process has been around for a long time. Before I even ran in 2009, I remember as a community member the issues that were coming forward about small school closures. One in particular was on Tancook Island, very small school with normally only maybe sometimes up to 6 children. So this is not something that is new. It is a very long process, and I am proud to say that it was the NDP government that commissioned Mr. Fowler to look at the issues with respect to this process. And so I'm very pleased that the minister is accepting the report that's coming forward from Mr. Fowler, and that they've traveled the province and they have talked to parents, and they have talked to teachers and community members. I know that this is just a start, and we are looking forward to what will come out of law amendments, because there are questions within that are not focused on in the legislature. So we're hoping that those will come to light and they'll be dealt with. It's important that there is long-term planning, and it's very important that communities get involved at a very early stage in the process. And those are the things that we're going to be watching for in terms of the long-term planning, that the planning that is done by the many different school boards that we have in the province will be consistent. We have to ensure that whether a school board is representing the South Shore of Nova Scotia or a school board from Cape Breton is using the same process. You can adopt many different types of long-term strategies. So we have to ensure that there's consistency there, and who is going to monitor that to make sure that the strategies are equal, the accountability, the time frame of a long-term strategy. What is the definition? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Is it 8 years? And when in the plan will there be a communication strategy within that long-term planning that will be the same throughout the province from every school board, to ensure that communities and families and parents and teachers know exactly when they have the ability to provide input, and not just the input but also be part of the decision-making process. The other point that we will be watching to see how it is worked out is with regards to school boards' responsibilities in terms of, we do know that they have the power to make the decision. How does the minister, how does that power structure work? Because presently it's in the hands of the school boards. If there is an issue, is the minister able to be involved in that, or is it that the minister will say that, well, that's a school board, totally a school board decision? Because I can tell you that from a public perception, the public always feels, even though they do vote for their school board members, they feel very strongly that those who represent them in government, and the minister in particular, should be having some more hands-on in terms of decision-making. So I think those are some of the things, especially when you look at the outcomes that will be addressed in the long-term strategies, and who's going to be accountable for that. What happens if a school board does not follow the recommendations? Does the minister have the authority to come in and make sure that that process takes place? The other piece that we'll be looking for is the suggestion about we know that small schools, especially in rural Nova Scotia, can certainly be an economic base for community. And school boards have an educational responsibility, and we know that their prime concern is education. And I know that within some of the review it talks about the economic part of that. But we need to make sure that that system is there and that there is input at looking at not just the hub model, because of the fact that sometimes communities, because they're all so very different and unique, have different resources, and some communities don't have the same resources to be able to offer a hub model that may be able to work for them. So will there be financial supports? Will it come directly from the Department of Education, or will it come from the school boards to enable them to be able to provide for a community that may lack the same opportunities as a community that's only 30 minutes away, that has more of the resources to be able to offer those hub programs? Because keeping in mind when those programs are usually operating are the times that the school would be closed. And we do know that we have some community school models in the province, but we have many schools that are not accessible after school hours or on the weekend. And so we need to see how is that going to all be worked out. So I think that this is a good start. And I'm pleased that, you know, through the former NDP government that we were able to, because we did know that there was a lot of issues, and often things do come to, you know, a head before, you know, that you sit and we had many discussions over the process, and there were decisions that were made in past governments that tied our hands as a government too, as will be with this government. And how are they going to approach that to make changes with regards to that, to ensure that this legislation does work and it truly works at the grassroots level, and that communities have the ability to work through that. We also know that there will be times, as the minister has said, that a school will just have to be closed. But I think the key is that people want to be a part of that process very early on in those stages. So those are a few of the things that we're looking at, and want to see how it works out in law amendments, and what recommendations and what people are talking about, and how there will be a transitional plan put in place to ensure that the legislation that's being presented here will actually work not just on paper but in reality. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Sydney River, Myra, Lewisburg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just have a few comments. They'll be short. First, I would just like to mention that when my daughter, who is now 35, she was 16 months old when I went to the first process of trying to keep a school open, and we've been doing that ever since. But here is the thing that I would like the minister to consider in this bill. First and foremost, there should be some kind of a regulation that the amount of distance that the child has to travel to get to the school, especially elementary, be part of the decision making. They need to be able to look at that. Secondly, I think we need to be able to look at the fact that sometimes geographically a school may be closer in another school district rather than in the school board that you're dealing with, and we should encourage them to work together to make it better for the child. Because we know from experience, traveling a long time on a bus, not getting the proper nutrition in the morning, has an effect on the outcome of the education of that child. And Mr. Speaker, my last point is, I just want to congratulate the minister on this being her birthday.
Well, now that it's been brought to our attention, I will take the liberty on behalf of all the members of the House to wish the Honourable Minister a happy birthday. So. Oh, and the Honourable Member for Halifax-Chebucto as well. If I'm to recognize the Honourable Minister of Education, it will be to close debate on Bill number 63, the Education Act. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps before I begin to respond, I would like to thank the member, and I would like to acknowledge my colleague. He does affectionately refer to me as his ledge mother. Please do that, Dave. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to hear the comments from my colleagues. I sense from all of the comments that there is support for a new process. I think everyone recognizes that it is a very emotional time. It has never been without emotion. It's never been without conflict. And what we're hoping that this legislation can do is to, as I said, rebuild the trust, keep the community and keep the parents involved from the beginning, not at the end of the process, to make sure that the committee has a broad representation. The distrust that exists in some communities between the parents and school board staff can be taken away, and there will be equal players on the committee to make sure that whatever is recommended is something that is a joint recommendation from all of those people who are involved. I will make a comment. There were 19 recommendations that came in the report from Mr. Fowler. We have accepted all 19 recommendations. They were based on what people told Mr. Fowler as he was going about doing his public consultations. One of the things that we did in order to try to demonstrate that we did care and we did respect the voices of those people in our communities was that we had a community representative go to each of those public sessions, a different representative for each community, so that that person followed the process through and sat at the table with Mr. Fowler when they came up with their recommendations, because I wanted to make sure that people in those communities understood that what they were saying was going to be heard and was going to be part of the final recommendation. So with those few comments, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues for their comments, for their insight, and I will now close debate on second reading of Bill 63.
Motion is for second reading of Bill number 63, the Education Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 63, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act.
Ordered that the bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please now call Bill number 65, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act.
We'll now call Bill number 65, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I move Bill 65, an act to amend the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Act, now be read for a second time. Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to rise today in the House to talk about this amendment. It will enable the appointment of an interim board to run the Commission and bring stability to the operation. Mr. Speaker, an interim board replaces the former board which I have suspended. This interim board will oversee the completion of an audit for the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition and development of a permanent and sustainable operating plan for the provincial exhibition. My three potential candidates for an interim board are Chair Bruce Kennedy, as well as Cameron McEachern and Gary Muse. Mr. Speaker, these three gentlemen will assume their positions with the passage of this proposed bill. The tender for the financial audit for the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition has been awarded to KPMG. Primary work is underway, and the audit is expected to be completed in July. Mr. Speaker, an audit and operational review will help the new board of directors get a clear understanding of the Commission's current finances and help them chart a path for a sustainable future. In closing, these movers will ensure that Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission is self-supporting has long-term stability and is able to help grow Nova Scotia's economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, Salmon River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's a pleasure to rise to my feet today to speak to Bill number 65, amended Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act. And I rise in support of this bill today. I'm sure some of the members across the way might be surprised, but yes, we do support bills that we believe in. And the minister and I have talked at great length about this particular bill and about what's going on in Truro Bible Hill. And personally, I believe this is a continuation of the work that I started a couple of years ago when I introduced a private bill as a backbencher in order to try and open up the board, the then existing board, for outside members to be able to join the board. Because when I became an MLA 4.5 years ago, one of the first things I was told was that people in the area were very concerned about the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition and the board in particular. They said that there was no transparency, that people didn't know where the money was going, that the money was being mishandled and mismanaged, and that the place was basically going to the dogs, although it was supposed to be for horses. So I looked into the matter, I talked to a lot of people, and one of the people that I spoke to at great length was Bruce Kennedy, who is now on the board and will hopefully be on the interim board. The minister has indicated that he is the #1 person who would be the chair of the new interim board. And Bruce knows all about the history of harness racing in Nova Scotia. He's had horses, he knows everything that you want to know about it, and he cares. And he's a businessman, so he knows how to make things successful. He also knows how to deal with expenditures and how to try and make people want to come and spend time and spend money at something that is it's part of our tradition. The Truro Raceway is 138 years old, and this summer, unfortunately, the board that was already in place took a long time for some of the members to decide that they were going to retire after being on the board for some time. So we opened it up, and a few members got on, new people, but not enough. And so the board, as it existed, threatened to close down the racetrack overnight. They didn't give anybody any warning, that not me, not the government, not the people, nobody. And we read about it in the newspaper, that they were going to close down the Truro Raceway after 138 years. For myself, I felt that this was something that I could not stand by and let happen, not on my watch. And I felt that it was really unfair to the horse owners and to the trainers and the people that worked there and all of the spin-off businesses right around the province, really. A lot of farmers who grow the hay, that feed the horses, and the tack shops and the harness makers and so on, gas stations, coffee shops in the area. So the thing is, I basically came out of the woodworks and said, no, this is not acceptable. We have to do something about this. And we had emergency meeting after emergency meeting after emergency meeting. And if anybody thinks that MLAs don't work hard, I'm sure that newer members are starting to get the idea now. We work really hard, we work long hours, and you never know what's going to come next. You never know what crisis is going to be on your doorstep tomorrow. And you have to be ready for it. You have to be ready for it, you have to be able to show up, dress up, get out there, and get the job done. And a lot of people don't realize that about us. They just think, oh, they just collect their big fat check and they sit around, they go eat hot dogs and hamburgers in the summertime, and that's all they do, and they're not sitting in the house. But that's not true. I know we all work hard, and I believe we're all here for the same reason. We care about Nova Scotia. We care about the people. We care about our way of life, and we care about our cultural activities. And in Nova Scotia at this time, harness racing is still part of our culture. In PEI, it's a huge part of their culture. Everybody pretty well has a horse over there. And they've got a beautiful racetrack, too. So this summer, we came very, very close to losing it. But what happened out of that crisis was the whole community rose to its feet and said, no way, Jose, we're not going to allow this to happen. And it basically forced the board's hand to then sit back and go, oh, okay, I didn't realize that people were going to be so up in arms and that the MLA was going to come out of the woodworks and be on every television show that she could be to talk to the people of Nova Scotia and say, this is not right, this is not fair. A lot of these people, by the way, don't have pensions. They've done this job all their lives. Some of these the drivers have worked at it. They're 65 years old. They don't have pensions. They've given their sweat, their blood, their tears, and their own finances into this industry. And for them to be told, by the way, after the next race, you're not allowed on the racetrack. You're not allowed walking your horses on the racetrack. We're not going to have any more races. Oh, and by the way, you've got 2 weeks to get rid of the horses out of all the stables and move them off somewhere else. So what happened next was we had a meeting, and sure enough, a number of the board members did step aside, and 3 men were voted in to take their places. One was Bruce Kennedy, one was Cameron McCacken, and one was Gary Muse. And I'm very pleased to see that these are the 3 names that the minister has put forward as being the probable or possible people to be taking over the interim board. So I feel very confident that they will do a good job. Gary Muse is well known in Halifax, and he is very well known in the harness racing industry and pari-mutuals. He knows that world very well, and for years now, pari-mutual betting has actually been paying most of the bills at the Truro Raceway. 92% of the revenue comes from pari-mutuals at this point in time. We'd like to change that and have more income coming in from other sources, and that's what these gentlemen will be doing. They'll be taking a look at the whole picture. I'm also glad to see that the forensic audit will be continued. It's only going back a few years. Personally, I would have liked to see it go back for the last 10 years, but it's better than nothing, and it's good that the minister started that, and I commend him for that. So I am very pleased to be here to speak to this bill, and together I believe we can change things and we can make this province a better province. Thank you very much.
If I'm to recognize the Minister, Honourable Minister of Agriculture, it will be to close debate on Bill number 65, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for those words of support on this very important issue. I know when I was first approached by the Premier to take this over, I thought to myself, oh no, what am I getting into? And I'm pleased that I was given that responsibility. I remember for being in this House for a long time, it's always been an issue of the raceway, and the issue has always been around accountability. That's changed the day I took it over. And I appreciate the support from both parties in this regard. And I'll just bring a quick update, and then I'm going to take my place, but I was talking to the operators and managers, the temporary people we have in place now, and they're actually paying their bills on time now, and there's a few bills, old bills that they're going to clean up shortly. So this is the off-season, the season before everything gets underway. So the centre, with the fantastic volunteers that are there working and the in-kind support that's coming in from several parts of the community, this facility is turned around in a very short time. So when we get the audit finished and we get the final structure in place that we're going to put in place this fall, I look for great things from that facility so we can have another 135 years plus there, which I think is very important to Nova Scotia's economy and to the economy of Truro Bible Hill. With those few words, I want to close debate on Bill number 65, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Act Amendment.
The motion is for second reading of Bill number 65, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 65, an act to amend Chapter 69 of the Acts of 1992, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please now call Bill number 66, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter.
We now have Bill number 66, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Bill 66, an act to amend Chapter 39 of the Acts of 1998, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, be now read a second time. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise in the House this evening to speak to these 6 amendments. These amendments were requested by Halifax Regional Municipality, and we are pleased to bring them forward to ensure the Charter contains the consistencies and clarity HRM is seeking. Mr. Speaker, the amendments give HRM greater flexibility and discretion when making decisions. They clarify some inconsistencies in the legislation and ensure the municipality can govern and administer efficiently and effectively. Mr. Speaker, one of the 6 changes requires an amendment to the Municipal Government Act. The other 5 amendments are contained in the HRM Charter. The amendment of the Municipal Government Act pertains to the ability of municipalities to regulate development near airports. Mr. Speaker, this amendment will apply to all municipalities that have airports, not only HRM. It corrects an oversight in the legislation for municipal planning purposes and harmonizes provisions regarding regulation of development near airports. Mr. Speaker, we want municipalities to have clear legislation and policies so they can carry on business and govern on behalf of their residents. I'm not going to give members of the House a history lesson, but I will provide a little background for context. Halifax Regional Municipality was incorporated in 1996. They've governed under the Municipal Government Act and now the HRM Charter. Mr. Speaker, it's the Charter where most of these amendments are being made. HRM approached us seeking clarity through amendments to the Charter and how they are to govern. The amendments align with HRM's long-term planning and are important to the Council as they move the municipality forward. Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on each of these amendments. I already spoke to the change in the Municipal Government Act relating to the development near airports. The remaining 5 apply to the Charter to address inconsistencies in the municipality has identified. Specifically, the proposed amendments will allow the Municipal Council to hold in-camera meetings for confidential intergovernmental matters, clarify that councils may make policies relating to when a special majority is required to decide a question arising at a meeting of council, allow infrastructure charges to be imposed for new or expanding recreational, fire and library facilities in a subdivision bylaw, include a justice of the peace as an issuing authority for entry orders, and make it optional for HRM to do a formal survey and description of property when considering property to be expropriated. Mr. Speaker, the reason for the amendment allowing Council to hold in-camera meetings is simple. Council needs the ability to discuss confidential intergovernmental information prior to it being made public. The rules apply the same as all other in-camera discussions with regard to reporting back to the Committee of the Whole and ensuring all decisions pass Council approval in the regular manner. Mr. Speaker, the amendment relating to special majorities to decide a question at Council meetings won't make any difference in terms of how Council is operating. This is a housekeeping item that is intended to add clarity to the process that is currently being used by Council. The amendment is retroactive, so there is no question as to what constitutes a majority vote on Council decisions before and after the passage of this amendment. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of the amendment allowing for infrastructure charges in certain areas is to support planned development identified in the regional plan. This change should encourage growth in a planned manner and be a clarifying tool for developers in answering questions around who pays for additional infrastructure to support the development. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the amendment to include a justice of the peace is an issuing authority for an order to enter a property. Mr. Speaker, allowing justices of the peace to issue entry orders will expedite the process for HRM. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and look forward to listening to the comments of the opposition.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise on Bill 66, where there has been a number of pieces of legislation come through the minister's department. We've been looking through most of those. We've been looking through all of them to make sure we fully understand them. This piece of legislation, Bill 66, we do have some concerns over, Mr. Speaker. and I'll take a few minutes to go through those, and we'll say that we won't hold up the process. We want to see the public and the ability for the public to come and make comments at law amendments around Bill 66. The first one piece, which might be just some clarification that the minister could provide either in his closing remarks or afterwards, is around the administrative order number 1 is hereby validated. Trying to figure out exactly what that entails. There's not a lot of information in the bill about it, so maybe the minister or his staff could provide over the next couple of days some information around what exactly that clause allows the municipality to do. So that's the first thing, Mr. Speaker. The second thing that we do have concerns with, and being an MLA for the last almost 11 years in the HRM, one of the areas that I've heard a lot of concern around with the municipality over the last decade is those closed sessions or in-camera meetings, Mr. Speaker. I don't understand why this piece of legislation expands the opportunity for the municipality to do that. There is a number of areas that allow them to do that currently. I know this specific change deals with when the municipality has some negotiations with either the Government of Canada or the Government of Nova Scotia. I don't believe that in-camera sessions or closed sessions is the right approach to take. Being in government over the last 4 years, there was a lot of projects that we worked on with the municipalities around the province, and we did that through communications, being transparent, not holding closed in-camera sessions. And we looked at projects like the new library here in Halifax, Mr. Speaker. I know it's been recognized for the architect design that it is. That's a piece of work that the province worked with the municipality on, all through the normal processes of the departments that oversaw it. Either it was transportation or even right down to finance and treasury board. They were able to have those meetings with the officials within the municipality, but at no time was there ever a closed session or in-camera session to get that project off the ground. The other one, of course, piece of legislation we just passed dealing with this is the Convention Centre, a huge endeavour which has a big price tag on it. The province of Nova Scotia has been able to negotiate with the municipality on that. At no time was there ever an in-camera or closed session to deal with that. The other one, Mr. Speaker, is the Fort Pad Arena out in Hammonds Plains, on the Hammonds Plains Road. Another great project for the community, a great project for HRM. And it was a relationship between the municipality and the province, and I believe the federal government had some funding in there also. That too, at no time was there a closed session or an in-camera meeting with the municipal council. Now, over the years, we've had, I think, some of those closed sessions that the HRM have had on huge projects that really were I mean, most of them were terrible. I remember one on the Oval. Everybody appreciates the Oval in Halifax, but there was a series of closed sessions, in-camera meetings with the municipality around the sponsorship and who would be allowed to try to bid for the sponsor of the Oval. And the public they didn't like that. They were upset with the fact that so many closed sessions happened. The other one is the KISS concert, Mr. Speaker. There was closed sessions on that. I'm a big fan of KISS, but when taxpayers' money go towards supporting events like that, there shouldn't be opportunities for these closed sessions. This is dealing with taxpayers' money. I think the opportunity that the municipality has now for those closed sessions are well defined in the charter. And of course, I think, recalling back a number of years ago now, but probably one of the biggest, I think, I'm trying to use the right word because you might call me, I want to use the right word, the balked job was the Commonwealth Games, Mr. Speaker. Something that I, as an individual, thought was a great endeavour to go after. The opportunities that would have presented to Nova Scotians would have been great. We just witnessed, for example, hosting the Canada Winter Games, and the legacy from that is amazing, Mr. Speaker, from one end of the province to the other. But the Commonwealth game and the reason I believe really took off in the wrong direction was because of the closed sessions, in-camera meetings. People in Nova Scotia and Halifax, for example, were not told what was going on. They weren't told how much it was going to cost. And that was all behind closed doors. And I remember, I think it was the Minister of Service Nova Scotia at the time, Barry Barnett, MLA from the next community that I represented. I seen him on the news that day or that night that they decided, whoa, the province, as a province, we can't support this because the information wasn't there because most of what happened was behind closed doors. And the province itself, I think at the time, made the right decision. They walked away from supporting that project. That project went nowhere. So I think it ended up in Glasgow, Scotland, I believe, or were the ones that hosted that. Edinburgh, Scotland. So there's just 3 examples of what happens when closed doors, in-camera meetings happen. And I don't think there's an appetite in HRM. I know there's not an appetite in Sackville for more of those closed sessions or in-camera sessions, and I do have concerns with that. I know the minister wasn't the minister at the time, but I hope he goes back to the department and asks what the atmosphere was like around some of these projects that went in the wrong direction because of these closed sessions. So with those comments, as I said, I hope the minister might be able to give me some clarification on the Administrative Order number 1. But we do have concerns around increasing the ability for HRM to have more in-camera, closed-door sessions here in Halifax. I don't think the public would support it either. So with that, Mr. Speaker, we will look forward to this going to law amendments, and I hope that the public, if they feel the same way, and I'm reading them right, that they'll voice their concerns on some of the clauses that are here in the Charter that will change the Charter that I believe we were told at the time when it came forward that the HRM needed the Charter and you'll never see us again. It's going to allow us to do our business. But I know many of the changes that have come forward in this session are changes to the Charter. And I know there's always opportunities that we need to adjust. But I think some of these adjustments that we see here are not what the residents of HRM would like to see. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I'm to recognize the Minister of Municipal Affairs, it will be to close debate on Bill number 66, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. The Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for his detailed analysis, and I'll make 2 commitments to my colleague. We will pursue and gather additional information on the Administrative Order number 1, and I will certainly engage staff specific to the examples that my colleague has provided, and follow up in discussions with my colleague at that time. So at this time, Mr. Speaker, I rise to close debate on Bill 51, amendments to the HRM Charter.
Does the Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs wish to correct the bill number?
My apologies. I'm sorry. Bill 66. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading of Bill number 66, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 66, an act to amend Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to advise that does conclude the government's business for today. Speaker, it's been a very productive day, and tomorrow we will meet on Friday April the 25th, from the hours of 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. The order of business will be the daily routine, whereas we will then proceed to the consideration of estimates. Following that will be the budget vote. If time permits, we will be moving into Committee of the Whole and third reading. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House will now rise and we meet again at 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. tomorrow.
Motion is that the House rise to meet again on Friday, April 25th, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Would those in favor of the motion please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. We now stand adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.